Hello and welcome to another bearing removal and installation video featuring Boca bearings. Today's engine is, the best I can determine, is an early to mid 80s Irvine 40 Mark II engine. Now these engines went through a lot of different variety or stylistic changes throughout the years, so it's difficult to tell exactly what this is, but I have it on good authority from a former Irvine production manager that what I have is actually an Irvine 40 Mark II. So let's go straight to the table and do a bearing removal and replacement for this really pretty old engine. Okay, so here we are. I think I have everything here necessary to do a bearing removal and replacement on this Irvine 40 engine. And before I talk about the engine anymore, let's just say I've got a wood block here, standard hardwood block that I always use to help me get the crankshaft out. Light hammer to go along with that wood block. Flat nose punch to get the front bearing out and potentially help get the rear bearing out if necessary. Desk vise, heat resistant glove, and my heat gun. So I left the engine in this condition because this is one of those styles where it's got the detachable front housing. So in theory, all I have to do is pull this front housing off, and if I don't, I think I might have actually cleaned this engine when I first got it, but I didn't replace the bearings. So ideally, I'm just going to leave this as it is, and we're only going to be working with this portion of it. And yes, this does look like it's a very clean engine, but it also had kind of a, because of the variant of this, it has an odd size bearing that really the only place that offers that size bearing is Boca. So what I'm going to do here is heat this up. We're going to tap this crankshaft out and see if that bearing comes out with it. Hopefully it does. And then we'll get the front bearing out. So without any further delay, let's go ahead and start heating this guy up and see what challenges, if any, this presents to me. Actually, before I heat that up, I think what I want to do is I want to open up my jaws here so that they'll hold just that portion of the crankcase and allow the crankshaft to come out. Okay, now it's set, so I can heat this up again. Let's see if, okay, well, so the crankshaft is coming out. The crankshaft came out very easily, and it's not super hot, which is kind of an issue because I don't believe that I'm going to have a lip for that, so I may have to employ a different technique. I don't believe that these, so getting this front bearing out should be no issue at all. There goes the front bearing, and there's the rear bearing also. So let me go grab that front bearing. So that's interesting because I thought what I was seeing here when it was like that is I thought that was actually still part of the crankcase, but it wasn't. So that's the interesting thing with this particular engine and the bearing, is that it's such that it just barely fits in there. So that's all there is to this. So let's, I don't know that there's even any need to clean this. So I'm just going to go ahead and shut the camera off for a couple of seconds, get all the other items I need to install the bearings, and then we'll finish this installation. Okay, so I'm back. The table is reset now to include the things I need to do a bearing installation, which one of the key things is lubrication for the parts to reinstall the bearings. And the one I always use is from Boca Bearing. It's Lightning Lube's Road Power, and I find this to be a very excellent reassembly lube. In fact, I usually keep some in this container, but I don't know that I've got enough. So what I'll do is I'll usually put just one pump in there and use that up, until it's done. So I've got my crankcase. So it looks like last time when I first got this, I must have cleaned this engine up because I didn't do anything to it yet. And the way it came apart, I just didn't recall. I know that I didn't have bearings on hand because, as I was saying in the first segment, this bearing that goes here is a very difficult one to find, and believe it or not, I didn't realize that at that time that Boca was basically the only place that had that, because I couldn't find the specifications for that bearing. I mean, I had some measurements, but I didn't know how that translated. So I've got my hammer here, I've got my socket extension to tap the crankshaft into place, which may not be much of an issue because this is the original bearing, because it's really only going to be going in there like, oh geez, maybe a 1/16 of an inch, and that's it. But I wanted to show that this front bearing that came out of this engine, I don't know if this was stock or not, but it's sealed on both ends. It's got rubber seals on both ends, which is not something I typically do on a two-stroke engine. I usually have the front sealed and the rear open, and that's how we're going to do this. And of course the rear bearing is open on both sides. So let's set those bearings aside, and here's a new Boca bearing set. It's a kit number. The kit number for this interesting Irvine variant is ENK-046HS. So I got the HS version, but it's 046 is the kit number. So let's take these bearings out. And this rear main bearing, which is the interesting one, is a B15-R8. That's usually like a 4-digit number for typical bearings, but this is a very atypical bearing. So let's take these out, and these are pretty much ready to go. So this rear or front bearing is sealed on the front, which is good, and it's open on the back. It doesn't look like it here, but that's just the phenolic race. So it is open, and oil can flow through there very nicely, so that's going to stay like that. And likewise, this bearing is open on this side, which is good, and then it has just a phenolic race. So it's, this is basically, these bearings are basically ready to go as it is. So I'm just gonna lubricate all of my parts now. Get the crank shaft all lubed up. Lube this. Now I didn't clean any of these parts because when I first got this engine, I had disassembled it completely and cleaned it all up, so it's really clean. And this is just patina. It's just a discolored, the front housing and the case, it's so old, it's just discolored. I don't know. Yeah, I can't get a little bit in there. So there we go. Let me get a towel here to wipe my fingers off. Move this out of the way. So what I'm going to do here is install this, and I'm going to install it with the phenolic facing the front. I don't know that it's really going to matter on this engine, just because of the fact that there's a lot of room for oil to go in and out of there. So maybe we can do it either way. I mean, I don't know that, like I said, I don't know that in this instance it matters much, unless it just doesn't fit. So the other thing that's interesting about this crankshaft is that it has the cutouts in it. However, it's fully round on this face edge. So had this not come off real easily, it would have been very challenging, or had this bearing come off with the crankcase and been really stuck, it would have been really challenging to get this off, because usually I use that cutout to help get on that bearing to remove it, but in this case we didn't have to worry about that. So this one will go in here like that. So let me get my glove on, and we'll heat this little portion of the crankcase up. It's not going to take much heat. It's already cleaned up. Small piece of aluminum. In fact, it's not going to take much heat at all, just because of the fact that this rear bearing isn't going to get seated much at all in there. There's our front bearing in, and like I said, this is not going to be much of anything. So I'm just going to put this in my vise here lightly and Just tap this thing in place. That feels like it tapped home. And that's all she wrote for this one. New bearings installed, ready to reinstall this engine. So that's all there is to installing the bearings on this strange odd variant early version of the Irvine 40 Mark II engine.